Well, between A Quiet Place and Bird Box, I think that the overall message these movies are teaching us is that having kids is a bitch in the post-apocalyptic world. So Bird Box tells a story of a world where some supernatural entity has caused a mass suicide hysteria and an apocalypse. And years later, Sandra Bullock has to get two children to a safe haven where she is unable to use her sight. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Bird Box review. This is a movie that was not on my radar at all. I barely remember even hearing anything about it. I vaguely remember seeing something about Sandra Bullock maybe doing a horror movie for Netflix, but didn't know shit about this movie. I just saw it pop up on my next Netflix feed. Me and Holly agreed it looked good, put the movie on, and it's one of the bigger surprises of 2018.
Where are you? Please don't take my children.
Now let me go ahead and get this out of the way. I feel like Bird Box is getting a lot of very unfair comparison and criticism in relation to the film that came out earlier this year, A Quiet Place. People saying it's a ripoff, saying, you know, it's like copying somebody's test in school. These movies were so close to each other in production that I'm telling you there is absolutely no way that the people making Bird Box had any idea what was going on over at the studio that was making A Quiet Place. It's just a matter of very unfortunate timing. And it's very unfortunate for Bird Box because yes, A Quiet Place is the superior film, but I feel like all the criticism that people are just dismissing it as a ripoff really is unfair to this movie, and it's unfortunately probably going to be its downfall. But if you can look past all of that, there's actually a damn good film here for you to check out. So starting right off with the positives, one of the main things that I really like about this movie is the premise and the story that it goes after. I am one of those maybe 8 people on Earth that unabashedly love M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening for how terrible it is. To me, it's the greatest unintentional comedy ever made, right alongside the Wicker Man remake. That movie is god-awful, but if you watch it knowing that it's god-awful and you enjoy it for how stupid and ridiculous it is, it's a blast to watch. But the central premise of The Happening, this mass hysteria of suicides and not knowing this, what is causing it, this entity, is it something in nature, that's kind of carried over into Bird Box and done in a much better way, a much more grounded way, a much more, sinister way, and it's not played for ridiculous laughs or unintentional laughs. It's actually done damn good. So the fact that you have a central premise to a movie that could have been great, that is now done well with Bird Box, I like that.
Something's happened. Can you just please drive? Did you see something? Come inside!
This premise that some supernatural entity shows up and anybody that looks at it instantly just starts killing themselves in the most violent, fast way possible, that's some terrifying shit. And they show you some very gruesome ways that people will go about it. And the fact that they kind of have it to where it's a more grounded approach where people figure out that as long as if they don't look at this entity, if they don't go outside and experience it, they can stay alive. So it just takes away kind of the freedom of life. You have to stay indoors. You have to stay blindfolded if you ever go outside to scavenge for things. All the post-apocalyptic tropes that we see where you have to go search for food, you have to go search for better shelter. You have kids that need certain things. And you have to go out into this mysterious ether of walking around, not being able to see, and having to figure out how to use drawstring lines to see where you're going, and a sequence we'll talk about later where they use a GPS to guide them through the road. And just like A Quiet Place, how they took a lot of these very grounded approaches to kind of getting the audience on board for how they're able to survive without making a sound. Bird Box does the same thing with how they're able to survive without using their sight outside of these shelters. And they do a damn good job at making it seem like a reality that we can buy into. And that's very important. When you have a premise that's so out of this world, far-fetched, and where you'd think people would just be dead in 5 minutes, especially if you have kids, you're never going to be able to tell them, don't open your fucking eyes. Because kids, the first thing you do when you say don't do something is they do it. They get you on board with it, and that's very important. Bird Box succeeds in that. Another thing that they succeed in is that tension that this premise brings. Whenever she is outside in the outdoors and you have the sounds that this supernatural entity is coming for them and tormenting them. You have the interactions where she finds these people who are kind of like followers of this entity trying to get her to look. It's all very tense stuff, and you are on the edge of your seat in more than a few sequences, really worried on whether or not her or both of these kids are going to meet their fate in this scene. And I also liked how they kind of go back and forth with the way that they tell the story as far as the timeline goes, because the main story of the movie is Sandra Bullock going on this canoe down this river to get to the end where this safe haven is supposed to be with these two children, and throughout this journey they cut back and they show you how they got to that point. And some would say maybe they flash back and forth a little bit too much. I didn't feel that way because it felt like every time they flashed back to Sandra Bullock in present time, they had something else to show you. They had an interaction with a crazy person trying to get her to look. They had an interaction with her using drawstring to kind of investigate and get supplies that show you how far her knowledge and how far her kind of survival skills have advanced from the past storyline. I like the way that they kind of show you two different shades to her character at simultaneous times. And Sandra Bullock, I got to give a lot of credit to her because, you know, she's an actress that's always done very good for the most part. I mean, she's had some stinkers here and there, but when you get a movie like this where she's really, the whole crux of the movie as far as emotion and as far as drawing you in is leaning on her performance, she delivers that in spades. She is great in this. You can tell when she's scared. Her character, as far as like the way that they write her as somebody that never really wanted children, and now she's in this situation where she not only has her own child, but she has this other child that she's been kind of forced to adopt, where that is now the purpose of her living, is to do whatever she possibly can to keep these kids safe. There's a nice little bit of character dynamic there where you have somebody that, you know, you're either a parent or you're not. Any parent will tell you, you're either born for it or you have the people that, you know, ruin it for all of us, that are the shitbag parents that leave their kids, or they do the worst things, or they let their kids run rampant. All of that stuff. You have a character that did not want children that is now forced to keep these kids safe. It's a really interesting dynamic. And there's a lot of great side characters in this too. You get John Malkovich, who's kind of like your typical asshole, where he's in a post-apocalyptic setting and he comes across as the asshole, but at the same time he does seem like the smartest one as far as how to survive. You know, you have two different ways that you tend to deal with the apocalypse in most movies. You have somebody that just longs for human compassion and they're trying to let anybody that they can in, you know, despite any safety concerns. They're trying to keep up humanity. And then you have the opposite side of the coin, which is John Malkovich's character, which is, fuck all of you, I'm surviving. Do not let that person in. This is my food. We're not doing this. You're an idiot if you're doing that. And he comes across as very strong and a dick in the movie, but at the same time, that character dynamic of, yeah, John Malkovich is probably smart and he's probably going to live longer than all of you.
We can't stay here.
Every contact we have had with the outside has brought us death.
Your kids, they deserve hope.
Every single decision I have made has been for them.
And then you have Trevante Rhodes, who is basically the guy that ends up surviving with Sandra Bullock and has to raise these kids throughout most of the movie. And the last thing I saw him in this year was The Predator, which was not a very good first impression for this guy. He's much better in Bird Box. At least he has a much better movie to work with. And he has a good dynamic with Sandra Bullock. You have these two people that never met, probably would never have met, that are brought together under these horrific circumstances, and they have to survive together. So you have a little bit of that love, you know, romance budding there, but you also have a little bit of obligation, like they can't have any other life except for together in order to survive. That always brings a little bit of good drama there. It's not like a typical relationship where you get tired of their bullshit and you can just walk away. They're kind of forced to work it out. And it's interesting seeing two humans from different sides of the tracks in many different ways forced to work things out and make the best of it, because their entire world is each other. And the movie has a lot of good central themes and a lot of good central messages surrounding these characters and surrounding the growth of Sandra Bullock's character. It has that whole question of, you know, if your only purpose, your only goal in a post-apocalyptic world is just to survive, are you truly living? Are you truly, you know, surviving for something that means anything? If you can't name your kids, if you can't enjoy your kids, if you can't love each other, if your only goal throughout the day is, all right, we got to go through the checklist of how I can survive till tomorrow, is that life? Some would say yes, some would say no. As far as negatives, There was some logic issues I had with this film. The biggest one was the scene that I hinted at earlier with the car. There's a sequence in this movie where they have to go and find groceries, so they have the brilliant idea of blacking out the windows inside of this car and just using the GPS signal to guide them through the streets, because they have the collision detection in the car where it'll say if you're about to hit something, and you know the GPS is going to guide them all the way. Absolute bullshit scene. Some people, like even Holly sitting next to me, she's like, well, I mean, they kind of explain it. They try to. But any of us who have ever used a GPS knows that that bitch is not even close to that accurate, where you can actually stop looking out of your windshield and look at your GPS and get all the way to your destination. Even with collision detection, there's so much debris out there and dead bodies and cars and just shit all over the road. There is no possible fucking way that they would have been able to get to that store using just a GPS. That entire sequence drove me nuts. So that's one where you have a movie that is so grounded and takes so much effort to do all this explanation on how they're able to survive realistically in this unrealistic situation, and then you throw a scene like that in there that is just wall-to-wall Hollywood script writing bullshit just to get from point A to point B. So that scene right there in particular was a big negative on this movie for me. Some other small negatives I have, like as far as logic, one of the other big ones is that throughout the movie they always have these walkie-talkies and they're always calling out at periodic times. Like, hey, is anybody out there? Can anybody pick up this signal? Trying to see if anybody else is surviving or maybe coming to their area. But they also show you that every single time that Sandra Bullock or any other character that has survived at that point of the movie comes into interaction with somebody that they don't know, their first reaction is to not trust them, to assume that they're the enemy, to assume they're under the power of this entity, and to not only defend themselves from them, but maybe even go in the offensive and kill that person. So what is the point of calling out to people? If you assume that everybody that is not part of your little group in your house is an enemy right off the bat, which is the smart assumption to make, why are you constantly reaching out for somebody? Why are you constantly letting people know that you're out there? She does it in the house, she does it on the boat, and every time she did it, I'm like, what? If anybody calls back on that, you're assuming they're an enemy. What is your goal with calling out? Another logic issue. And the only other small negative, which still kind of does tie with logic issues, so really logic issues was the only issue I had with this, is that it does feel a little bit far-fetched to go so hard with the themes of the movie about finding humanity and especially the struggles, the motherly struggles of Sandra Bullock, to go so far as to having her never name these children. Even her own kid. The boy and the girl that she takes care of throughout the entirety of this movie, she refers to as boy and girl. When she calls out to them, boy, where are you at? I've never thought that it was realistic enough, even if you were completely detached, even if you full on hate the fact that you had a child, to spend 5-6 years alone with just them and one other person for the most part, and not even be able to have enough of a connection with them to give them a fucking name. To me, that was a little weird. But all in all, guys, I was really surprised by Bird Box. I think if you're a fan of what A Quiet Place did, if maybe you were a fan of the concept that The Happening was going for and royally fucked up, you will like Bird Box. It is definitely worth your attention. It's worth the attention for Sandra Bullock's performance alone, but it feels like one of the truly great movies on Netflix, which unfortunately so far they have a very spotty record with, so.
Listen to me. We are going on the trip now. It's going to be rough. Hold on! If you hear something in the woods, you tell me. If you hear something in the water, you tell me. But under no circumstance are you allowed to take off your blindfold.
Do you hear that? The creatures.
If you're a fan of any of the themes that I've been talking about or the concepts of those two films, definitely check out Bird Box. Go online right now to Netflix and stream it. So what do you guys think of Bird Box? Are you a fan of what this movie went for? Did A Quiet Place kind of ruin it for you and it felt like it got there first and there was nothing left for Bird Box to give you? What are your thoughts? Put them down in the video comments below and we will talk about it. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. If you guys want to check out some social media links, check the video description below for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spreadshirt for Cody Leach merchandise like t-shirts, designed by the great Woody Bowen, and my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only if you decide to become a patron. So check all that out, guys, and if you want to check out some more of my videos, you can check out a few more by clicking right over here.